Hello, this is Jorbs here, coming at you with a Spire side chat. So it's currently January the 10th where I am, and on January 14th, the Watcher releases to the main branch of the PC version of Slay the Spire, and I'm not sure exactly how it goes from there. Eventually it will get onto Switch, and I know that the devs are working on mobile versions of the game. I don't know if it will be on mobile immediately or not. But this is a fourth character. It's a fully developed character. I like it at this point. I didn't like the Watcher a super large amount when she first came out to the beta branch. I've been playing her for a few months on the publicly available beta branch on PC. But at this point, I do enjoy my Watcher runs quite a bit. She feels a little bit different from the other characters. She's sort of like an ironclad with more complex stuff going on, but no exhaust synergy type things, is sort of how I might describe her to somebody who had never played her but had played the base game characters. Without getting all the way into all of the different things that Watcher does, I think I can do a Spireside chat on Protect and teach you some relatively important things about the game that maybe you haven't thought about. Protect is a 2-cost skill that gains 12 block, actually used to be 13 and has recently come down to 12. And Protect has the keyword Retain on it. Retain is a keyword for Watcher. It's sort of like well-laid plans for Silent, where Silent's well-laid plans lets you retain a card or two until next turn. And Watcher just has cards which have Retain on them, which means that they stay in your hand until next turn. And so with Protect, you have this 2 energy block card, and it retains after you draw it, so you get to play it whenever you would like. The upgrade is to 16 block. So the way to look at this card and think, oh, that doesn't seem that good, would be to think about how much block you're getting per energy out of it, and see that you get 6 block per 1 energy, which is barely more block than a basic defend gives you, and think, well, basic defends aren't that good, so Protect's probably not that incredible. And I think that some people are probably going to look at Protect and evaluate it in that sort of way. In actual fact, Protect is one of the best block cards in the entire game, including the rare block cards. And I think this card could be printed as a rare pretty reasonably for Ironclad and Defect, and it would get picked a decent amount of the time. This card's actually very, very, very good. And the simplest way, I think, to explain why this card is so good is to say that with each hand that you have at the start of your turn in Slay the Spire, you want to be able to do one of 3 things. You want to be able to block, or you want to be able to deal damage, or you want to be able to scale up for later in the fight. Basically, I'm simplifying obviously, but basically every turn you want to be able to do one of those 3 things. But every turn it's a different thing. It's not always the same. In a boss fight, a lot of the time you want to be scaling. You might be getting attacked for 30 in a boss fight, but it's so important to scale up so that you catch up to what the boss is doing faster that you just take the damage and don't bother blocking it. Whereas in a hallway fight, you might need to attack for 30 damage to kill the enemy before it did its horrible exploding attack or something, which you really want to avoid. And in a different hallway fight, or in a boss fight, or in an elite fight, or whatever, you may want to block for the turn. You might be getting attacked for 20, and it might not be worth it to take the 20 damage for any reason, so you decide that you're going to block that turn. And one of the big challenges in Slay the Spire is, how do I build a deck that's going to consistently draw me hands which can do any of those 3 things as needed? Because the way that you have bad turns in Slay the Spire is if a turn requires you to do one of those 3 things and you can't do it. And those turns are what are going to lose you a lot of runs. So when you look at Protect here, what you're looking at is a common that's an okay block card And it's definitely worth pointing out that a card that costs 2 energy lets you turn more energy into whatever job that card does than a card that costs 1 or 0 energy. So the fact that it costs 2 energy does make it significantly better than a basic defend. Because you only have to draw 1 card in order to basically play 2 defends. So it's like it has card draw attached to it almost. Compare it to Shrug It Off for Ironclad, and I think most people who have played a lot of Ironclad recognize that Shrug It Off is very, very good because it has that card draw attached to it. Well, Protect, by virtue of being a 2-cost card, sort of has card draw too, because it sort of does twice as much as a 1-cost card might do. So not only does it do that, but it also stays in your hand. So if you draw Protect and you don't need to block with it, you get this scaling, essentially. You are now stronger for later turns in the fight, where you now have this Protect in your hand and you can play it on a turn where you do need to block. And that is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly valuable. It's very hard for me to motivate just how good that is. And I think that it only gets better as you get into the higher Ascensions in Slay the Spire, where in higher Ascensions in Slay the Spire, the game is more and more about having the exact right cards for each turn of each fight. Like, there are some turns in fights, like Act 4 Elite Fight turn 2, or Reptimancer Fight turn 3, or the Champs Execute. There are some turns in this game where you need very, very specific cards to do well on that turn, and being able to have access to all the different specific types of things that you need and being able to draw them on the right turns is a huge amount of the challenge of winning as much as possible in the highest difficulty of the game. And getting a common level, common rarity solution to being able to block, or a bunch of block to turn 2 energy into block at a decent ratio, just gives you a huge leg up as Watcher. So Protect is a very, very, very central card to Watcher succeeding. It's a card that I'm generally happy to have like 3 of in a deck. I want to point out that Deceive Reality is a card that is actually quite similar to Protect. This card is different in some minor ways, but overall it has quite a similar effect where when you draw it, you get to add a big block card with Retain to your hand. And if you look at this, you can spend 2 energy on this for 60 and block even without it being upgraded. So in that way, it justifies being uncommon. But Deceive Reality actually sort of has a downside where you do have to spend 1 energy every time the turn you draw it if you want to keep the safety in your hand. Whereas with Protect, you just draw Protect and not have to spend the 1 energy that turn. So Watcher gets to block with Protect and Deceive Reality, and these 2 block cards are so good that Watcher barely needs any other of the like traditional types of block cards. A lot of the other characters, like Silent, I think would be the best example of this, try to block by having many copies of cards like Backflip, maybe Dodge and Roll and Deflect. Silent can do other cool things with Piercing Wail and Malaise and Weak and stuff as well, and Intangible with Wraith Form. But a lot of the characters are fairly dependent on having lots of 1-cost block cards like Shrug It Off, or lots of high-impact block cards like Glacier, and putting enough of them into their deck that they don't run into those turns where they're getting attacked for 30 in hallway fights and don't have a block card available, because those turns will happen a lot if you don't have enough block cards and you'll die. But Watcher, by virtue of having Protect available and by virtue of having Deceive Reality available, doesn't have to commit quite as hard to these block cards in order to have enough block cards to defend herself against those turns. And because of that, you end up with enough room in your deck to do some of the other cool things that are available in the class. I also want to point out, just because I'm talking about blocking with Watcher, that Like Water exists and is very strong, ties into the stats mechanic on Watcher, and Talk to the Hand, I think, Well, we'll talk about Talk to the Hand a little bit. This is another card which is very strong at blocking. Watcher is very capable of playing a lot of attacks per turn, so this can be great. Wallop can be a very good block card for Watcher because two of Watcher's stances actually cause attacks to deal more damage. This can block for a lot. And then also want to point out that Wave of the Hand is a very important part of Watcher's mitigation packages, where this is just a card which will weaken all of the enemies in any fight for you by itself. And so if you can get one Wave of the Hand into your deck and make sure that you can play it, that sort of means that you're covered on cards for week. So I just wanted to mention those as well. But yeah, the first big thing I wanted to say about Watcher, as she's releasing soon, is, hey, this Protect card is very, very good, and puts Watcher in sort of a unique situation compared to the other characters, where the requirements for Watcher of how many block cards go into her deck in order to have enough block cards to defend against the get attacked for 20 or 30 type turns in hallway fights that you want to make sure you're not taking a lot of damage from in most runs. Yeah, you don't need as many block cards on Watcher because you get to have cards like Protect. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll be talking about a few other Watcher cards and some more upcoming Spire side chats. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.